Hey guys, Brian delivers you the goods here. I'm returning to you tonight for the Tuesday album review you've been waiting for, and hopefully you will enjoy this Tuesday album review for P.O.D's follow-up record to their second album, I believe it was, the fundamental elements of Southtown, that I got a chance to listen to for this 1999 album. See what I was going to think of this 26-year-old album. So I'm going to discuss what I listened to for all 16 tracks, which is a runtime of almost 58 minutes, and let you know my thoughts on the album as a whole. So let's dive into this album review. Now it starts with Greetings, which opens up the record alright. For the most part, it's a 4.75 out of 5. It's mostly a intro track, and it does fairly solid for how it sounds. So yeah, 4.75 out of 5. Hollywood is a good track, but I wouldn't consider it one of my favorites. I think Sonny's vocals kind of get a little underwhelming at times, but there are some good moments with this track with the drumming and guitar work. That was the pretty strong aspect. And Sonny's vocals from time to time did good in the verses, but when the chorus kicked in, it got a little repetitious. So overall, it's a 4.5 out of 5. Still a good track in its own way. Southtown is probably one of my favorite songs and was a single for the record, and it overall is a very strong track. I really enjoyed Sonny's vocals, and in this track, there were some scream moments where there was some cringe to it, but other than that, if you don't look at that as a bad thing for the track, then I guess you could say this is going to be one of your favorite songs from this album. So 5 out of 5 goes to Southtown. Check-In Levels is another interlude track that goes into the next song, Rock the Party, Off the Hook. So it overall was another pretty good song in its own way. It's just Sonny rapping in this track around the 30-second mark or somewhere around that time period in the track. So it overall did alright, so 4.75 out of 5. Rock the Party, Off the Hook, featuring Lisa Papaneer, I believe is Papanew, is how you pronounce it. This was a pretty good song in its own way. I mean, I had a few critiques with this track with how it's overall mixed, but execution-wise, I think it did alright for how it turned out, so this is a 4.75 out of 5. Lie Down was another pretty good song in its own way. I'm going to give it a 4.75 out of 5. It does drag on for over 5 minutes, but it executes fairly well for how it sounds. So yeah, 4.75 out of 5 for Lie Down. Set Your Eyes to Zion is another pretty good song in its own way. It does play it safe a bit with how Sonny's singing the track, but it overall did alright for the execution. So it's another 4.75 out of 5 for this track. Did fairly solid for the most part. The next track is Lo Siento, instrumental. It's just an instrumental going into the next song, but it overall did fairly well for how it sounded in its own way. So, as an instrumental track, I'd give it a 4.75 out of 5. You're not in for much of a track. It's pretty short for how it sounds. So, the next track is Bullet the Blue Sky, U2 cover, featuring Lisa Papanew, is who's in this track. So, I think this one was another strong one too that I can personally get on board with. So it's a great track too. It's a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed Sonny's singing and flow in this track. It had a natural flow. It definitely wasn't a miss. It was a hit for sure. So yeah, 5 out of 5 for this track. Sorry, I'm just yawning and I think the video's lagging a little bit. And if it is, I'm so sorry about that. But the next track is Psalm 150. It's another pretty good song in its own way. I'd give it a 4.75 out of 5. I think Sonny's moments in the track are fairly solid. I don't think there was much of Sonny rapping in this track or singing. It was some kind of interlude going into the next song, Image. So it overall did pretty good in its own way. It was mostly a guy chanting religious chant and all that. So it overall did alright. 4.75 out of 5. Sorry about the background noise. My cat was using his litter box. So you know how cats are. Image is the next track. It's another pretty good song in its own way. I'd give it a 4.75 out of 5 for this track. I think Sonny's rapping and flow in this track did very well. So it was another pretty good song for how it sounded. So 5 out of 5. Shouts was a 56-second track that did pretty well for how it sounded. It was somewhere around that time frame. Sorry about the yawning. I'm just really tired. I'm about ready to go to sleep very soon. But I wanted to return to you for this review tonight. That way you know that I did it and that hopefully you enjoyed a portion of this review despite the yawning. Shouts is a 4.75 out of 5. It's another interlude track, so it did fairly solid for how it executed. Tribal is another pretty good song in its own way. I'd give it a 4.75 out of 5. I think Sonny's singing and rapping in this is fairly strong, and it executes pretty well. Freestyle was definitely a track where he was rapping and singing. In this track, Sonny was mostly rapping. And it did very well for how it sounded, so in its own way, I'd give it a 4.75 out of 5. Follow Me is the second to last track before you get to the closing track to the record, which is like over 9.5 minutes. But overall, Follow Me is a pretty strong track in its own way. I'd give it a 4.75 out of 5. I think Sonny's singing in this was pretty strong. So was his screaming moments. Those were the highlight. And overall, the guitar work and drum work did fairly strong. So 4.75 out of 5. Outcast, which is only one section of the track. And then it goes to Tambura, which is the final 3 minutes of the track. So it closes out for all two tracks into one for 9 minutes and 34 seconds. So it did fairly well for how it sounded, and I'd give it a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed Outcast and Tambura. They were very strong tracks put together, and it flowed very well as a extra track to this record. So definitely enjoyed this. 5 out of 5. Overall, production, mixing, and execution-wise, I think P.O.D.'s The Fundamental Elements of Southtown for this Tuesday album review was a good listen, for sure. It was better than the first two albums that I listened to from P.O.D. in like a year or so ago. But overall, from what I listened to, I was very impressed with P.O.D. from this record. So if I were to give the fundamental elements of Southtown a score, I mean, it does have a lot of hit or miss tracks on this record, but if you look back at it and realize that this is the style they're going for, you may enjoy P.O.D. as a band. And I enjoy P.O.D. as a band for how they sound, so 8 out of 10 is what I'm giving P.O.D. The Fundamental Elements of Southtown. It's a good record. I definitely recommend you guys check it out. If you have not listened to it, it's the third studio album in their discography, and it overall did fairly well. So 8 out of 10 for P.O.D. The Fundamental Elements of Southtown album. I hope you enjoyed this album review. I'm about ready to go to bed, so I'm so sorry that my eyes are just ready to close shut because I'm just really tired. I've had a day, basically, and from what I listened to with this, I was impressed with this listen. So, yeah, 8 out of 10 for P.O.D, the fundamental elements of Southtown. Hope you enjoyed this Tuesday album review for Season 7, Episode 9, and thank you guys for watching. You guys have a good night.